Okay, you're not in your best behavior. We're recording. So today is a simple topic, metaphysics and all that. I thought you'd like something a bit serious for a change. Okay, so knowledge is an ever-expanding entity. The strange thing about it is the more you know, it's not that there's less to know, there's always more to know, which always is sort of interesting, um, especially with something as simple as here and there, which everybody knows. Okay, so I thought we'd have a simple evening. Anyway, philosophers from Plato to Derrida, Heidegger have grappled with metaphysics of here and there by addressing topics like space, selfhood, and the relational nature of experience. I won't, as usually I don't, go through how different philosophers have dealt with the topic. What I will do is to touch on ways to look at here and there, for you to leap upon instances that affect your thinking. Since we've got people from all over the place, everybody has got, those who want to talk have got something interesting to say that enlightens all of us, and that's what we're looking for. So, um, at first glance, here and there are simple. Here is where I am, and there is everywhere else. Um, Here and there are spatial, and they are temporal. It could be another way of comparing here and now with there and then, in a sort of analogy to space-time in post-Newtonian physics. The statement, the only place where here is where I am, everywhere else is there, seems to be a reasonable statement. More than reasonable, in fact. But, and here come the buts, how large is here? And it doesn't include only me. So here in I am here could refer to my home, the park, or to a town, or a country, or the earth, or even the universe. To understand here, then, let's create a border, an edge, a circle to encompass it. The problem is that it's always a subjective border, the context that we define. And while it is defined from the circle in which we are, here always includes I, always. It can't be anything else within that context. Now, of course, here will often include other people in the same accepted area. So while Mary announces that I am here in the park, the here would include all other people who are also here in the park. When Mary sees a map in the park that says you are here, dot, the dot or the arrow, all other people who see it will also be here. And of course, the dot is a problem, as are all maps that are representations of some sort of reality. Not only can they never be exact, but they apply to the past and to the future. The past is when they were made, and the future is to show you where you're supposed to be going. Okay, we are left with a paradox that the more accurate something is, the more useless it is in practice. In theory, the map which would most accurately represent the territory would include everything and would be a map on a scale of 1 to 1. That map would cover the whole area, the whole area. So it's actually pretty useless, apart from the fact that things are actually changing from when it was put onto everything. Oh, here comes the first conundrum. Location, similar to time, allows us to know only what or where here is when we are there. But we are never there. We cannot be anywhere other than here. There is only for a theoretical observer who sees both here and there, i.e., here and there as relative to each other. My point is that while there isn't a here without a there, that is, here compared to there, here and there are relative to each other only to an outside observer. The point is that each position is correct from each point of view. It's an important point. What is usually thought of as referring to time, as per Einstein's special theory to relativity, I've used it, well, paraphrase it actually, for space, i.e. location. So here and there aren't fixed points within an absolute space, like Newtonian space, but rather only exist relative to observers within a space-time framework, as in Einsteinian physics. In quantum mechanics, there is the wave-particle duality, where the behavior of particles depend on observation, meaning that here and there are not strictly fixed until measured. And now hold on to your seats, because we're going to have a little chat about the metaphysics and science of seeing a faraway star. So hang on. We are told that we are seeing it as it was X light years ago. But the star is not there. We are seeing its light here. We presume that the star was there, but it no longer is. It's not here either. So am I seeing it now? From my point of view, nothing is here apart from me. But that applies to every object. The tree I see there, back in time because of the time it takes for light from the tree to get to me. So do I see the tree or any object now, i.e. here? No, I don't, because I'm seeing it as it was, and it is moving back in time all the time. So if I move towards the tree, I am in theory moving back in time to where it was, but I'm also moving forward to the future. Time is both here and there, with one being a mirror image of the other. But when does something actually arrive? Does anything actually arrive here, or is it always there? When and what is actually? Where is memory, by the way? Is it here? Yes, because it's mine, and I'm remembering it. But it is also there because it happened in the past. And if it's here because it's mine, it is also there, even though the memory of the dream has changed it. It's a different dream. This puts paid to a popular way of explaining here and there, which goes like this. The past could be a there remembered, and the future a there anticipated, with here as the fleeting, ever-changing present. Now, I don't go with that, of course. If here is continuously changing, that it is not the present, and it is not here, an ever-changing present would immediately and always be the past, and here would immediately and always be there. Time travel, have to mention that, don't I? It's impossible, can't happen. I've written about this quite a few times, and in my time book, it's spelt out quite a bit. In moving back to your past, do you move from here to there so that there becomes here? There is a similar problem with moving forward in time. Is the will be there that will become here, or do I take here with me? This brings us to the problem of identity. Perhaps where I am is what I am. So moving back or forward will be moving to a different I. After all, we don't stay the same over time. How long does I last? It's always changing. What is becoming clear is that we are hard put to discern a dividing line between here and there. Is there a sharp boundary, or is it a continuous gradient where here slowly becomes there? There is a greater question. Is there a line between anything? Where does anything end and something else begin? And vice versa, of course. Where do periods of time begin and end? Does the past end, the present, the future, do they begin and end? I see the universe as a continuum. The problem, of course, is. That word is, which gives us the false impression of stasis, beginnings and endings, But those of you who were at the meeting, we did a whole meeting on is quite a while ago. The only time when the continuum is broken, we won't know about it. It is when our personal is ends. How does here and there fit into Eastern philosophy, where all is one? It is presumably here. Can we be part of everything, that oneness? How would we know? Rhetorical question. It seems that the more we zoom into nature, the more confusing the nature of here and there is. In quantum mechanics, we talk about waves collapsing and the measurement problem, where particles can sometimes be here and sometimes there and sometimes here and there. So here simply means found. Before they are found, where are they? They aren't here. Are they there somehow? I'm asking now if they exist before they're found. Now, if you look at yourself in a mirror, is your image here or there? Supposedly it is here, because it's the only image of yourself you can ever see. You can only see a reflection of what you may look like. What do others see? You don't know. And by the way, for somebody who sees your image in the mirror, is your image here or there for that other person? And are you both seeing the same image? In other words, nobody knows what they look like. Of all the philosophers who have discovered here and there, I do want to mention Derrida, who critiques the binary of here and there as part of his deconstruction. He shows how these opposites are interdependent and destabilize upon closer examination. Every meeting I have to mention AI because I'm fascinated by it, as a lot of most people are, I think. In AI systems, here and there are programmed abstractions, I believe. For example, autonomous robots or the AI used in cars use algorithms to navigate and localize themselves, but their sense of here is unlike human experience, I presume. Obviously, much of what I've mentioned is illuminated in the arts, where the concepts of here and there are central, as they touch on themes of presence, immediacy, identity, and the transient nature of experience. How separate from the artist or the writer is what they produce? Is it here or there, part of themselves or separate? In Shakespeare, all the world is a stage, part of the actors on it, there, or are they in it, here? Are the observers, the audience, here or there, and for whom? Much of visual art is there for the viewers, who move backwards to get the whole picture, literally. But Mark Rothko's abstract color fields invite the viewers into an immersive here, where the viewer becomes part of the painting's space. In fact, the closer you get, the more amazing they are. Stories in literature and film often revolve around journeys or attempts to bridge the divide between here and there, whether literal or metaphorical. For example, Homer's Odyssey focuses on the physical and emotional journey from there back to here. Literature and visual arts often construct fantastical theirs to contrast with the real here, exploring escapism, dreams, or alternate realities. For example, Lewis Carroll's Alice Adventures in Wonderland shifts between here and the fantastical there of Wonderland. Or take J.K. Rowling's Harry Potter worlds, which make theirs so real as to become his. We can't imagine not imagining. Basically, we can't imagine our own non-existence. So we can't imagine not being here in the sense of our non-existence. In that context, we will never experience there. Never. It would seem obvious that here and there are different in space, location, and time, but I'm no longer sure. There is some sort of overlap that is as metaphysical as it is scientific. And I don't know if there's a difference, by the way. Perhaps what they have in common is approximation. If where I am and where you are approximate, perhaps we are closer than we think, or further away from each other than we would hope. And I end here, and I hope I mixed you up enough for you to ask questions. If not, goodbye. I can't see any hands up. Oh, yes, I can. James. Okay. I thought you'd all.
I'm so
I,
sorry for
I
being
thought.
so eager. Yeah.
No, I thought you'd all leap at me and tear me to pieces.
Um,
Okay.
so, okay, to me, here is a bit of an illusion. It's a privileged location. It's a word that we use to privilege the location that we inhabit, either subjectively as an individual or even as a group. We can say we're all here at the meeting. No question about it. We're all here. And we've location has become a kind of like a has become uh, an ability, the ability to converse, to the ability to commute, with each other. And so that's basically the entry level for here. But in here is imaginary. It's a bit of an illusion because we're not really here in one place, are we? So here is a part of speech that we use to designate that illusion of reality always centering on oneself and not around oneself, shall we say, and not around someone else. And it doesn't even have to be around oneself, it could be around a group that one is in communication with, such as your tribe, people that live in your area that you communicate with. We're all here together, me and all my neighbors, and so it's commutable. It's a term that's easily commutable. I notice I study German a lot, and I notice that there's a difference between the parts of speech between here and there. Here is almost always a an adjective, and or I mean a pronoun. Here's almost always a pronoun that you just stick in there to say, you know, this is where we are, or kind of like a an adjective, an indicator, and then maybe they call it a participle. But then the uh, there can be a pronoun, or it can be a preposition. Actually, in German, ich bin uh,
Da.
uh, here, da my Freunde, yeah, mi Freunde ist da.
But
So
by the way, before I forget, da in German could be here and there, which is
yeah,
extremely
it could be.
interesting. Very
It
interesting.
could be, but it could be, but it generally translates to there. Yeah, either in almost any place it appears in the sentence. Yeah, yeah. You can switch it. So I'm just saying that there has a special kind of freedom that here does not, and here is a little more limited. That's all. So that's my point. I think my point is fairly simple. That here is somewhat imaginary. We designate the privilege. It's a privilege term, and the privilege comes from our subjectivity. The idea that knowledge always starts with me and my. You even said it. You said the memory is always mine. It's the so so it's kind of like it's always mine and it's always here. It's a privileged term because we use it to center on ourselves, to allow ourselves to be egoistic in our worldview. and forgive ourselves for that, and to forgive our tribe for being the people. Early man always called themselves the people. So uh, it was this idea that we are the ones that are in the know. That's the meaning of here. And all of these spatial locations, that we know are somewhat not absolute. It's not an absolute position like Kant believed it was. It's always something relative to something else. So metaphysically, um, we can only locate it. We can only locate ourselves in relation to other objects. So uh, by an arbitrary measurement too, as well. So which can be a standard, no question about that. So that's all. Yeah. So it's
Very,
here.
very,
Here is
very, very,
imaginary.
very,
That's all.
very,
That's fine.
very, very interesting, James. Very
Yeah.
interesting because I agree with everything you say, which is unusual, but I come to a complete opposite conclusion
Sure.
because here is special, as you say, and it's special because it comes from the only ones who can be here. Of course, there is all over the place because it's not us. The us is the only thing, from my point of view, from epistemological point of view, the only thing that counts is what each I knows, and therefore it is privileged and it is special, just for the reason that you said. Very, very interesting, by the way.
We have to be my opinion, we have to be careful about overvaluing it because it is imaginary.
I can't overvalue myself.
That's
And
my point of view, is that
and
a lot of people easily overvalue their location, overvalue their knowledge, overvalue themselves. I've read a lot of it. Trust me. This is not the first time
I
I've encountered
understand.
someone that overvalues their knowledge. Yeah.
I don't think, okay, I don't think one can overvalue oneself because oneself is the only thing that exists as far as they are concerned. But anyway, we'll get back to that. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Jay. Very interesting. Hi there, Michael.
Hi. I also agree with James that this notion here and there is relative and is subjective. But I would expand this to pretty much all that we know and that become parts of our language and inform our thinking, that everything is relative and subjective. Because the only our window, so to say, into the world is through our subjective experience. And what we see from this experience, that there are some things in the world that affect us directly, and there are some things that we can affect directly, and there are many things, or most things, that don't have any obvious connections to anything that we feel or anything that we do. And so this is what we roughly approximate as here and there. And if there is some physical reality behind this experience, then this is what was in classical physics the notion of locality. So the interactions between systems are local in nature. So they don't affect directly system A and system B. Interactions between them does not happen in the absence of any intermediate systems between them that would mediate this interaction. And this is both in classical mechanics and in classical field theory, this notion of locality, which is somewhat challenged by quantum mechanics because the most widely accepted of interpretations of quantum mechanics is that probably at the very fundamental level, the quantum systems are not local. And this notion of entanglement that captures this. And it's not still immediately clear how much this would be a challenge, because even if it's theoretically not local, but when it comes to something that we can measure or we can detect, it's still, for all practical purposes, it appears to be local to us. But there is a very intriguing similarity between quantum mechanics and our perception of the world. And similarity is that our perception and what our connections to other things in our world, especially to other people in our world, they're also not necessarily local. We can care about people who are not physically close to us. And we can care about them, and we can have deeper connections to them than to our neighbors. And this has somewhat similar implications to what there is this idea of relational quantum mechanics, that it's all in relationships. And relationships are not necessarily local. And also another idea from relational quantum mechanics, that we all are quantum systems, including us humans. We also are quantum systems. And this notion of relational and generally non-local interactions, in principle, it can be applied to us. And whether what we have in our minds, this indirect or non-local connections to other people, sometimes even to other countries, or even to other worlds, how much this can parallel the notion of non-locality of quantum mechanics, I don't know. Maybe there is some deeper connection. Or maybe this is just superficial similarity. But this notion of locality, it also can be expanded, that if you consider not just 3 or 4-dimensional physical space, but if you consider the functional space with multiple dimensions, then the two systems that are not close to each other in 3D space, they can be close to each other in other dimensions, and vice versa. So it's well, I don't know how fair it is to use the same term of locality and non-locality for other dimensions, but this is something that we could also consider. So let me stop at this.
Thank you, Michael. Can I throw a great huge spanner, not at you, at what you said about locality, etc. So I have a problem with it. I mean, I'm not the only one, but I have a different problem with it. That local and not local make no difference from a epistemological point of view if you know about it. And as far as I'm concerned, and I know people don't kill me for this, as far as I'm concerned, it's happening. If you know about it, it's happening. I don't care whether it's local, what you call it, local or non-local. If it's happening and I know about it, that's it. I'm not that local and non-local physics means something. It doesn't mean that much to me personally, although I'm not a physicist, so don't take any notice of what I'm saying from that point of view. Okay, so
well, it's happening to you as long as it's a part of your subjective experience,
but,
right?
okay, so we agree.
But whether it's happening in reality, quote unquote,
Oh, my
that
reality.
that's related to, say, quantum notion of matter. So whether it happens only in your imagination or whether it's something that.
Okay. We're going to argue about that later. Okay. Thank you very much. Very, very interesting. Thank you. Richard, welcome back.
Let me unmute because I muted when you asked everybody. Okay. First, en passant, because I can't remember Heidegger very well. My German wasn't good enough to ever understand him totally.
Even
And I'm
Germans
sure
don't
we've got
understand
an
him.
expert. But when you were talking to James, was that actually Dasein? Da and Dasein, rather than when you're talking about here and there. But as I said, I'm sure there are other experts who can go into what Heidegger meant by Dasein, because I can't remember. Then going on to what you've been talking about with Michael, and I don't understand most of his physics, I'm afraid, but anybody who followed science fiction will remember that the whole idea of traveling through space is to find wormholes so that you can go far faster from here to there, wherever there may be. And it means, and I'm getting to what I really wanted to get about, we tend to think of here and there as separate, but really it's the relationships between all the theirs. It isn't one there, it's everywhere here. And there are lines going from wherever we consider ourselves to everywhere else, wherever we're connected. And so therefore, if you like, you have a representation of the physical world, but this is a conceptual model. Your brain constructs a conceptual model. And to illustrate this, I'm slightly colorblind. My uncle, who was killed by the Germans in the war, when the ship went down, was totally colorblind, but he could see far better in the dark. I can see slightly better in the dark, and it's all to do with the rods and cones. But there are different numbers of colors that you can see. Some people only can see one color. Some people can see two colors, if you like, or two areas of color. Other people can see millions of shades of color. I'll put it as shades because I don't see them. I've realized that some of distinct colors to other people, to me, are in fact just seem like shades to me, but they're distinct colors. Okay, so this ties in with your conceptual model. Everybody has a different conceptual model, but the physical world that we're trying to model is presumably the same, but we don't know whether it is or not, which is where I think there's so much confusion, because we're all seeing different things. And to go back, I don't want to keep raising the same idea, but to go back to parallax, we're all standing in different places, describing that's here, describing Salisbury Cathedral in the distance, and that's there. And we all see a different object with different colors, with different surrounds from different areas. And the whole of life is like that, if you like. And depending on what sort of life, whether it's human life, animal life, bird life, you'll build up different models, obviously. And some are more sophisticated than others. And I think I'll stop there so other people can talk. I could go on, but my view is not totally consistent going any further.
Richard, are you implying that somewhere there's actual reality actually there that nobody can really see?
Oh, I'm implying that all we have are models of what we think is reality.
Okay, fair. No, it's fair enough.
I mean, you talked about maps. A map is a model. We can find out that it can be useful. I mean, I can get from here to Australia in a small boat if I have the right equipment, or nowadays actually just if I've got some way of communicating. But normally if I've got a map and you can use it and it seems to get you from here to there, and there can be all over, but in fact it is possible. And you've got to be careful. You'll be going into the Indian philosophy that you scorn, because we tend to think of everything as cause and effect, but Indian philosophers like Shankara and Nagarjuna saw it in a different way. For instance, Nagarjuna would say, we talk about, say, a cart. But what is a cart? A cart is made up of a wheel and spokes and different parts. And if those parts aren't assembled, then you don't have a cart. There is no such thing as a cart until you put it together. Or even more, if you, Spurs won today, by the way, if you think of a football team, Spurs, the football team I tend to follow in North London, win, they can beat anybody on their day, but they can also lose to the worst team in the league because they don't always play as a team. Other teams who are not as good as them beat them sometimes because they're playing as a team. It all depends whether those parts are connected.
True. Okay. Thank you very much, Richard. Thank you. Tim, welcome.
Thank you. Okay, so doesn't it all depend on isn't the perception a priori? Isn't it projection instead? So, right, we have one person will perceive a certain reality in quotation marks, the there. Another person will perceive another one, but that's because one person has a certain psychological makeup and is seeing through one's own beliefs and prejudices and right, and even understandings. So isn't this all projection? A priori, we see, if you don't mind me saying it this way, we see ourselves. We come from the basis, how can we say, of self-awareness, and then we project it out onto the supposed there and then call it reality.
So where is the here? If the projection is there, right?
Okay, so it depends on the person, right? So a person, so then to extend this, a person who has maybe we'll say a narrow outlook, not a grand awareness, maybe will have a smaller here, and the person who has a deeper understanding of things will see a bigger here. And maybe you alluded to a oneness, maybe that person would even be able to approach seeing a oneness to the depth that one can see. And then that seeing, my point is, the seeing is seeing oneself on the inside and it's projected out. So all we see is ourselves. Is that not right? Wherever we look, we see what we think we are. We're seeing through our beliefs, our prejudices, our understandings, like I mentioned a few seconds ago or whatever. We see ourselves.
Okay.
Unconsciously, I would suppose if anyone is aware, there would be just a few that are aware of this, but everyone generally is going to be unconscious. They're seeing themselves.
Okay. Thank you very much, Tim. Thank you.
Okay.
Josh, are you still walking?
Yes,
Yes,
indeed.
you are. God.
Cannot disappoint. Well, so far, and I suppose, and I suspect we're going to hear a lot more of interpretations of your theme that dip into philosophical approaches that are kind of representationalist. So there's the subject, there's the world, there's the veil between us and this world. We only know what's real on the basis of our schemes that interpret the world one way or another. So these lead to ways of thinking that rely on epistemology. interpretations that dip into one of the sciences, whether it's neuroscience or whether it's quantum physics, are doing something similar. They're using a kind of a representational epistemological way of trying to understand how we use words and what those words latch onto in the quote unquote real world. I prefer the later Wittgenstein. So according to the later Wittgenstein, I think this discussions that try and resolve these issues concerning the different paradoxes that emerge and all the different ways that we use here and there are problems of our own making. Wittgenstein says there are confusions of grammar, where we confuse grammar and epistemology. And what I mean by that is that epistemology is where we have some sort of a schematic explanation of the world, whether it's from quantum physics or psychology or philosophy, and then we try and then we try and understand how we're using words on the basis of the various definitions that derive their sense from these from some sort of a theoretical orientation. So those are epistemological approaches. But what Wittgenstein recognized was that any epistemological approach only gains its intelligibility on the basis of a kind of a what he calls a language game, and that is a kind of a set of presuppositions which tend not themselves to be questioned. In fact, we don't even recognize that we're resting on presuppositions. So that's the grammar underlying the epistemology. So Wittgenstein would recommend what he would call a therapeutic approach, which is to let the fly out of the fly bottle. That is to say, rather than getting stuck in these problematics and paradoxes that are of our own making, we let the fly out of the fly bottle by recognizing that how we use a word like here and there is a function of the context of the language game. And there are many different kinds of language games. And we don't recognize that we're switching from one language game to another. And therefore, we try and find some sort of a single epistemological approach that is going to explain for us the paradoxes that arise out of the fact that the sense of how we're using these terms isn't fixed on the basis of some way that the world supposedly is, but it's fixed on the basis of how we're using those words with each other, and those usages are contextual.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank
You're
you,
welcome.
Josh. Going to get back to you on that.
Okay.
Have no fear. Sebastian, welcome. Sebastian, are you there or here?
Yes, sorry, I was turning on my
Right.
camera. So I have a few things here that I would like to say. So one of the interesting things that has been coming up often is this idea that, perception is the identity of our experience of there even being a there and here, a kind of depth of perspective. And it's interesting because I was looking through this book that I have that's called Reality Switch Technologies, and it's based off of a sort of phenomenological exploration of psychedelics and the psychedelic experience and what it means for the computational aspects of our mind and the sort of neurochemical processes and mechanisms that come to incorporate and integrate our intuitive experience of the world. And in this book, I wrote down a passage that I think is very interesting, and it's called a treatise on the fractured fold of the precognitive disjunction. So it's based off of two concepts. It's based off of a concept that has to do with how perception is self-referential, or it folds in on itself in the sense that it is an active process between the body and the sort of idea of the mind and its agency, and this idea that in any moment in which we are perceiving the world and integrating it and processing that information, we are trying to come up with a kind of a continuous stream that is in essence contiguous with what we see previously, or what we perceive or what we sense previously, while at the same time achieving a kind of control over that perception in terms of pattern recognition and creation. But in this passage, this short passage that I highlighted and chose to write down, the author talks about a kind of torsion that occurs within a phenomenological torsion, which, if you're not familiar with that term, it's a mathematical term, but basically what it means is you have a distortion that occurs within the process of that integration, not of the senses, but of the actual sense making apparatus. And it's interesting because the people, there are people that have epileptic seizures, and what's interesting is that when they have epileptic seizures, they report sort of perceiving the world as sort of being completely unified and at one, but at the same time they cannot integrate all of that, because the regular structures of in which they make sense of the world are sort of fragmented, or they are sort of put into different systems occurring across time and throughout different rhythms, biorhythms, and the nervous system cannot, when it has an epileptic seizure, all of these different systems that are informing our perception or our interperception of not only ourselves but ourselves through time, it all gets sort of confabulated. And so I could read from the actual text, but it would probably not suffice any more clarity than at least for now, than maybe I would, if somebody's interested, then I could read from it, but that's all that I would say for now.
And the connection between here and there, as far as that goes.
As far as I see the connection in the book, I mean, the idea that we perceive depth in at least visual depth, that to me seems to be what informs most of our idea of there being a continuous sort of temporality to our experiences. But the curious fact that we have, that our memory, at least our intuitive sense of memory, can at times meld different experiences, different empirical experiences together in ways that are nonlinear, and in ways that do not sometimes do not actually occur, sometimes are actually products of the imagination. And it's interesting to see the coupling between these structures. It's interesting to think about that being possibly the ultimate reality in thinking about there being the existence of a sort of discontinuous other. I don't think that that it's easy to think about these things when you, at least when you consider that. So that's what I would say.
Thank you very much, Sebastian. Thank you. Hi there, John. Welcome.
Thank you. Hi, Sebastian. That was a little bit too complex for me to follow, but maybe you should have your own meetup and you can go into those issues. So Ron, my question regards something I said, something that you said about like you cannot truly be here. So,
I think
I kind of did a
I
thought
think I said the
experiment.
opposite.
Okay, okay, so you didn't say that.
I don't think so.
Okay,
Anyway,
because the way so that caused me to think about like what you were saying, like I'm always thinking about something that occurred in the past, right? That's kind of my thoughts, things I learned in the past, and then even what I'm perceiving is from the past. It's something that, light refracting off something that's coming to me. So I'm not perceiving the present. And then I kind of did the thought experiment, like if I'm meditating and I close my eyes and I'm not thinking about anything, would I in that case truly be here? Or more precisely, perceiving the here? So that's my question for you.
Look, I'm a very skeptical person with a C and or with a K. Um, I I have never experienced and don't know how it's possible to not think of anything. I mean, you can tell me afterwards you didn't think of anything, but at the time that you're thinking of anything, could you do anything or tell me about it? I'm not saying it can't happen, okay? I mean, I don't think it can, but I mean that's not the point. I'm just wondering about this. People saying that when they meditate they don't think of anything. I'm just wondering how that's possible, and it might be. I just
It's
don't.
more hypothetical, just like if you could.
If you could think of nothing, and would you be here or there? That's what you're asking. Yeah, yes, am I right?
Would you be perceiving the here? I mean, I'm always here, right? But I'm not
Right.
perceiving the here. I'm perceiving the there because of the processing delays. The light comes at me at a different time than it, hit the tree or whatever. I'm hearing things that occurred, a mile away, 2 seconds ago or whatever, the lightning.
Yeah.
So can you truly perceive the here?
I the word truly also gets me going, I'm afraid. When you say, can you truly do something? I don't know really what that means. The truly business. You mean truly for you or truly as an objective truth?
I
So
think truly was just an unnecessary word I used. Just can you perceive the here?
I don't know. I mean, I think I know I'm here, but I yeah. Why do you think it might not be? Or are you?
No, no, I'm not saying I don't think it might not be. I'm just thinking about it. I'm just
No,
thinking
you're
about
right. No,
the seeming paradox.
no, it's a good question because I can't see how you can not perceive you're here because you can't perceive you're anywhere else. As far as I know, unless you're taking drugs or something, but then I'm not sure what actually happens there. Perceiving you're here, I think we all perceive we're here. I can't perceive I'm somewhere else because if I do perceive that, then I'm perceiving it from where I am here and imagining being somewhere else. But that's not the same. So no, it's a good question. I have to think about it. I don't. If the answer is yes or no, I think my answer would be no. But it's a good question. Thank you,
So,
John.
so you're welcome.
Thank you very much. You can join in again. Everybody can have a go. So thank you, Frank. Welcome back.
Yeah, thank you. Um, this may be kind of repeating, I'm hoping synthesizing, but maybe just repeating what people are saying. So as we're talking, I remembered back to grammar school, and Sister Letitia had this exercise in my early grades where she would ask where we were, kind of locating ourselves to help us understand the world and whatnot. So she would start with, here we are in room 101. And then room 101 is in the St. Augustine Parish. And the St. Augustine Parish, so I'm in the St. Augustine Parish. And the St. Augustine Parish is in the back of the yards neighborhood in Chicago. So I am in the back of the yards neighborhood in Chicago. Uh, Chicago is a city, and I'm in Chicago. So here I am in Chicago. Chicago's in Illinois. So here I am in Illinois, and so on. So I think the idea was to get us to imagine where we are, to place ourselves, which has a practical purpose. But in terms of here and there, the here then becomes both room 101, it becomes St. Augustine Parish, it becomes the back of the yards neighborhood, it becomes Chicago, it becomes Illinois, it becomes etc. It becomes the earth, it becomes the solar system. I am here, so to take that and combine it with one of your mantras, Ron, that you can't really imagine your own death or your own non-existence. I'm probably botching that. You can't really imagine your non-existence if here is this onion of expanse and there is a place where I'm not. Maybe does there even exist? If I can't imagine
No,
myself not being somewhere, then everything, to use James' notion of a privileged perspective, I have a privileged perspective. It all revolves around me. So pardon my megalomania, but there is no there because I can't imagine myself not being, right? So anyway,
no, hang on. No, existence and being somewhere else, that's completely different. I'm talking about your own existence, not being in another room. You're still existing. But my point is very, very, very crucial one, that we can't imagine being dead. That's non-existence. That's the point. I can imagine not being in Chicago. I can imagine not being in a load of places, but I can't imagine non-existence. I can't do it.
I guess
That
my
was my
question
point.
is, can I imagine myself Can I imagine myself not being in Chicago, or can I imagine myself not being on Earth?
Yes,
I
yeah. Imaginations are very wide and very weird sometimes. But that's not existence. As soon as you say I, when you ask the question, can I? That's proof. That's your existence. Can I imagine? But it's the not I that's the problem. The non-existence, the not I. So that was
and I
my
guess that
point.
to me, that's what there is, the non-I.
But there, what death is there? That's what you're saying?
So the only there that I can imagine would be like death. The only there I can imagine is something that does not is the set that does not include me, right? And since I'm a part of the set of everything, what's the set that doesn't include me?
It doesn't
There is no there.
no, there is no set that does not include you if you're thinking about a
Right.
set that doesn't include you.
Right. Yeah. Right. Exactly.
Well,
So if I am here and the set that includes me is here, and the set and if there is the set that does not include me.
no, but you can't imagine that set. That's my
Exactly.
point.
No, right, exactly.
So
So I'm saying that there is just a, a mythical concept.
not when it comes to existence. There's nothing mythical that you can think about when you can't think. I mean, it's gone. I mean, there's a very it's a very important point. This non-existence. It doesn't mean that you can think of a place that you don't exist, but you're still existing because you're thinking of a place you can't exist. When you're demised, that set does not exist for you. It just doesn't. It's just not there. I mean, no, it's not there. It just isn't.
Well, this is where the here and there, becomes a problem for me because I'm having a trouble with the there.
Yeah, but it's you having the trouble with the there, which means you're existing to have trouble
Exactly,
with the
right.
there.
I have no problem with here because here really basically includes everything.
Okay, fair enough.
It's the there. It's the thing that does not include me that I have a hard time with. But anyway, that's my current
No, fair
conundrum.
enough.
So,
Fair enough. No, it's an interesting point. Thank you very much, Frank.
Yeah.
Thank you. Roland.
Hi.
Oh, there.
Yeah, it's a deep discussion. It's quite interesting. I don't think I've ever thought that clearly about there. There is really hard,
Yep.
but here I think is a bit easier. But so I've got a few different ideas here. First of all, given that both of these ideas here and there would appear to be perceptions of people, I would start from the idea of perception generally, or awareness. So both here and there, being perceptions or aspects of awareness of people, must be happening within that person. So there's always already a bit of a problem here, because there, whatever we point to, must be happening within the observer who's observing it anyway. So there is always already a slight confusion here about whether there could be anywhere else but within the observer. So maybe it's not a very good starting point to separate there from the observer anyway. So my second thought was, how do we use here? How do we use it? So I was thinking, several thoughts occurred to me here. One was, if I say I am here, I'm not really equating here to I, am I? I'm saying I am within here. It's like here is like a circle, and I'm here. So I could say, like Frank mentioned actually, which I thought was spot on this point. He said, he's in Chicago, Chicago's in Illinois, and so forth. You can get it's in America, it's in, the Earth, it's in the solar system, So you can point to the solar system and say, I'm here. That's quite a big place. And I'm in this room at the moment. I can say I'm here in this room, or I'm here at this table, or I'm here in this meeting. So this expression here seems to me to be closely connected with the context that we're currently considering or perceiving. It's like we cut out an area that we're interested in for some reason and say, yes, here we are. But it doesn't have any geographical boundaries as far as I can see, or anything like that. It's very closely related to what we're trying to do. So I might say, I'm here in Norway. What am I saying there? Well, I might say, well, now this is where I live. I live in Norway. So if I was to describe some other aspect of my life, or what I'm thinking of, like I'm here at this meeting, my presence in Norway is irrelevant. It's not relevant to consider. So I'm not really thinking about Norway now. I'm thinking about being in the meeting. So this is the first point I want to make about this idea of here being, as it were, selecting a context within which we are focusing on something. Now there is quite a tricky one, but what I've come to thinking about there is about identifying some aspect of here, something within the scope of here. So, for example, I can say, I'm here in this room, and over there is a teapot. So it's not like the teapot is not here. The teapot's over there, but it's still here. So, and there's no conflict there. If someone was to say, well, how can it be here and there? I can say, well, it's easy. It's here in this room, and it's over there. And there's no problem with that, is there? So I can't see here and there as like opposites or, in some ways mutually exclusive. They seem to be partners that are associated with a way in which we cut up our world, as it were, the way we perceive objects and the context in which we're perceiving those objects. And it can lead to some interesting things. When you were saying, Ron, about the map with you are here, it reminded me, a couple of days ago, we went for a hike up the mountain and into the wilderness there, and we were trying to identify exactly where we were. So I got my phone out, and there's the GPS and the little, tag on the map, and I pointed to one of the kids and said, "Oh yeah, we're there." So of course he said, "Well, no, we're here." So there's this. Again, it's a context, isn't it? We are there because I'm referring to an element of my context, which is there, but we are also here within that context. So generally, I try to look for principles that kind of seem to connect things together and make sense of what appears to be complexity. And I think this isn't a bad way of looking at it. To think of here as a context and there as something identified within it. So I'll leave it there. Thanks.
You'll leave it there?
I'll leave it there, yeah.
Okay.
Well, here, I'll leave it there.
Okay. No, it's very interesting that people said, we're here at this meeting. Now, I'm wondering if you're here in this meeting is the same as my being here in this meeting. Because as far as I'm concerned, all of you are over there and I'm here. And that goes for each of you. I'm here, and the rest of you are there, and that seems to be quite fair. I'm always here, wherever you are. I'm here, always. I can't see how we get out of that. The fact that I did mention that here can be enormous. We can be we're on the earth. In the world, but we're still individual here. Wherever we are, we take here with us. And the wider here is fair enough, but it's never without I. Never, cannot be. And the there is somewhere else, not here, not that here anyway. Maybe there should be maybe there should be a capital H and a small h, just like truth.
Yeah, there might well be. It did occur to me as you were talking, you could have a scenario where I can say, I am there. So,
oh, yes, if you look at the map, I'm there.
No, I was thinking of a different type of scenario. For example, supposing, okay, the picture that came into my head was, imagine there's a sort of accident on a mountain where someone is like hanging by a rope, and you are there to, you're there to support the person and try to help rescue them. And you might well say to that person, I'm there for you. I'm there with you. That's something that people often say when there's when there is some kind of when someone is under a stress or in a situation of overwhelm or whatever. You might well say, look, I'm there with you, mate. So what does that mean?
Would you say? But would you say I'm here with you? You wouldn't, would you?
Not necessarily. Well, you could do, but it's a bit more distant, isn't it?
Exactly.
If I'm there with you, you're right there, aren't you?
Exactly. No, but you're always here. But I'm there with you means
I'm here, but I'm there with you.
Yeah. No, but your hair is always there. Oh God. Okay.
Maybe it's neither here nor there.
Yeah, very possible. No, but I mean, obviously, the subject is highly complex, is why I chose it, and it became more complex the more I thought about it. I dug myself into huge holes because of things that you're saying. It's such a simple thing here and there, but it isn't. As soon as you start digging, you're lost within this great hole, this abyss, which is the interesting part of knowledge. You keep on
Mm.
digging and you go deeper and deeper and deeper. There's no end to it. To anything. This is the simplest thing there is, here and there. Everybody says it. But look what we're discussing here. They're very
Yeah, it's a good
interesting.
example.
Very, yes. So so thank you, Roland. Terry, hi there.
Well, hello. Ron already stole my line. I was going to tell you that all you said was neither here nor there, but Ron beat me to it. So, peace around. Um, Here is my awareness, my consciousness, what I am. There is the time. Poke time is how long it takes by my clock, not anybody else's clock, my clock, to go out and poke whatever it is and change it. If I can't poke it, then it's not really, if it's a long time before I can poke it and say, oh, I change what I consider to be something in some sense external for myself. That's a very relative term, but you go out and say, okay, I can poke it. And if what you're trying to poke is a star, you have a conclusion. It's really far away because you're just not going to succeed. And poking is not the same thing as seeing it. You can see the star all you want, but you can't poke it. Now, if the star is in your imagination, you can poke it very fast, so it's not very far away. But if you have a definition, you say that there's something more to reality than just what I can immediately visualize with a poke time of 0, then in that case, you have to make that acceptance. You have to say, I am going to accept there's something more to reality than what I see inside my own head. And only at that point can you start defining a there that's non-zero. Otherwise, this is why I say in your imagination, there is no time, there's no distance in your imagination. It's true. Because as long as what you accept is the only thing that's important is that image, then if I want to make the star at Betelgeuse blow up, it just did. I just saw it in my head. Not very well. I could see it better if I was in a near dream state or just waking up. But sometimes you get very sharp images when you're just waking up. But I poke time, how long does it take to poke? And do you have a model in your head which you accept poke time as a valid measurement? The clock is always mine. To me, this is all a matter of time. If you don't devote time, there's no concept of there. The whole thing is about distance. Those all translate back into time at some point. And you say, how long does it take me to do it? Because we don't really have a concept of space inside of our head. We have complexity in our head, but we don't really have a concept of space. Well, that's all I have.
You're talking about physical here-ness, as it were. That makes it.
Oh, I'm not even talking physics at all in this one. I'm just saying that I have here is me.
No, I mean physical poking, for example.
And I got this view of what it is. When I start talking about there, for me, it always translates into poke time. How long does it take to poke it, to touch it, to change it in some fashion that I can identify that was a result of my intention, that it was not just an accident. I have actually had an effect on whatever this thing is. And calculating that time, once you accept those premises, is what makes the difference. What makes something there?
Telepathy, is that here or there?
I don't know. It doesn't, if you have.
I mean, if you think that you can have
the idea that telepathy works and that you can perceive something there, that you can touch it from a distance, then you can say that in terms of telepathic, this would be, I guess, a little bit like entanglement. You can say, oh, wow, in this case, there was a lot closer than I thought because I was able to touch it a lot faster. In fact, entanglement, arguably, actually, there's a lot of tricks. You have to be really careful about entanglement, really careful. There's so many misconceptions in that. There is not a single instance of entanglement in which you can poke it any faster than the speed of light. No matter what people have told you, you can put it out there, but until you actually go out there and touch it, you cannot verify that it was entangled. And guess what? You can only do that at speed of light. So there's a lot of misconceptions about entanglement, including, I mean, in deep technical communities have misperceptions about this. There was a physicist whose name I always forget, but he was one of the first ones I saw that he made the point very strongly. Said you don't really change something on the other side of the universe with entanglement because you don't see it until you actually go out there and visit there. So you may have set it up years ago, but it still doesn't become real until you actually go out and touch it. So you wind up speed of light bound anyway. So, well, the universe is a strange place, and we don't understand it real well.
Yeah.
So anyway.
Well, Einstein didn't like entanglement either, to put it
Well,
mildly.
and actually so, because the whole idea of non-locality is, I've got a little article on my website about that. It's about non-locality is a meaningless term. And I mean it quite literally. You cannot define it in a fashion where it actually means that you change something outside of where you were. Asher Perez, that's one I always forget. Asher Perez, brilliant fellow. It's a paper he wrote, one of the very last papers he wrote, and it was just an aside. But he was adamant in saying that, if I change an entangled particle here and I twist it around, the standard interpretation is that you suddenly change something on the other side of the universe. Experimentally, that is never true. You don't change anything. That suddenly doesn't magically change on the other side. But what does happen is when you get together with that person, you will discover that there's a connection between the two. But that connection does not come into existence until you actually travel to that point. The very weird. I remember the first time I saw that, I said, I love this guy because I agree with him completely. I have no idea what he said. And I've changed my view on that over the years. In fact, I'm totally in that perspective these days. But it's a very strange thought. Space and time are not as fundamental as I think we like to think they are. And that makes it strange sometimes on how these things work out. Got lots of hard limits. Speed of light is an extremely hard limit, but that doesn't mean it's, quite what we think it is.
Very interesting. Thank you, Terry. Very interesting. I largely agree with that. Thank you. Anton, good to see you again.
Hello, and great to be here. This is such an interesting conversation. Can you hear me loud enough?
Yes, you're fine.
Okay. So, I mean, there's a lot that can be said, but I'll go back to the idea of non-locality again, at least my idea of non-locality. So Michael mentioned, as it relates to the non-locality, that it's possible, or maybe he was just saying to consider that one of the things he said is that two things may be close to one another in one dimension, but not in another, or may not be close. I guess you could say it two different ways. May not be close to one another in one dimension, but are in another. Now, I'm gonna add in a lot more, and I'm not saying that this is what Michael was saying. This is me adding in my experience, but what definitely seems to be the case is that you can be emotionally close to someone who is physically far away. And most interesting that this can be with certain, like I experience this with certain people that I know on Meetup that I've never met in person. So there's an emotional, or you can maybe even say metaphysical, that's definitely believable to me, connection there. Does that have to do with being close on a quantum level? I don't know. There's also this, are conceptual selves and ideas as distinct from the tangible. And I'm including the physical world when I say tangible. Richard says, which makes a lot of sense to me, that we don't necessarily know the physical because we have different models of reality. Is everything merely models, or frameworks could be another word, of reality and nothing more? Possibly. What I tend to assume is that no one person or group has a 100% knowing of reality. I think most of us assume that anyway, but it's, I guess that adds in something else, but that still, I don't know if reality is only conceptual or only frameworks. I do want to say, I don't have that much more to say, Ron, because you were asking, I think it was John earlier in the meeting, can you think of nothing in meditation? Because you have a hard time with the idea of thinking of nothing. And in my experience of meditation, when someone says, I'm thinking of nothing, or I get to a point of thinking of nothing, it could be a language ambiguity. When they say nothing, that just might mean the non-intellectual or analytical ideas, or less of that. So I wouldn't say nothing in a literal sense, but it's letting go of the intellectual analytical more or less. That might make more sense to you, but those are some ideas that I have.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Anton. Thank you. Um, William, Bill.
Seems to me that here and there is about relationships. And I think that's been said several ways, in different ways in the past in this session. And the relationship that I talk about, what I hear in the conversation going on here, is that it's a matter of what's going on in my mind and what's out there in the world that I apply it to. And that's a relationship that's most significant to me, because it's in here that I have standards, I have rules, I have principles, I have constructions that I project on the world and evaluate what's in the world. Now, Ron, that seems to be important to be in the relationship to my head and the world, because my head and the world are the relationship that's critical, isn't it? And, I have grief. For example, I have grief in my mind about a lost lover, and I can turn to a piano and say, there's a picture of my lover. There is a picture. And there is a world out there that I can talk about in connection with that loss. But isn't that basically the relationship that we're all talking about? The relationship between our minds and the world that we apply them to? That's my thought.
Yes, no, that's that. I think that's more or less what I said, but I'm not sure. The relationship between here and there would be here being my mind, I
Right.
presume, and
Yes.
and that's my relationship with all the rest. I think that's what you'll say.
Yes.
My relationship with all the rest of it, which means it's
Yes.
all,
Art, music, literature, the rest
yeah. I think
is there.
it's us against the world. I'm not mean against. I mean there's here, and that spreads out over the rest of it. But the here stays with us.
Yes.
Literally has to. We
Yes.
can't move out of here.
Right.
Only in literature, etc., etc. But whatever we write and we think about, it's the here, it's the us that are doing it. All our imagination comes from here, from each one of each person's here. That's how I see it. I can't see any way out of that. So
Right.
I agree with you. Thank you very much. Thank you. James.
Sorry. Yeah, I just wanted to mention a couple details. I think it was Tim that mentioned a point of view which is really interesting. I thought because it kind of focuses back on the Husserl's point of view. That when we and also I think Terry took a position something like that that we stand um, upon when we observe something or we have a phenomenological relationship to something, we're actually intending something for it. That's what Husserl said. Think that's a good conception. Uh, yeah, and the other one is kind of going for a more physical approach. In other words, we have to touch the thing, we have to interfere with it. Well, what we have, according to Husserl, is a kind of intention, and this is interesting because people, I think Richard was talking about Heidegger, and this relates back to Heidegger's phenomenological view, which is, and Heidegger was the PhD candidate of Husserl's, and then Husserl goes all the way back to Descartes, for example, and maybe some other German philosophers were on that path, sort of, including Leibniz and so forth. So this is kind of the idea is that there's a structural analysis that can be made in phenomenology, and the structural analysis is that what is the connection when we actually perceive something. So when we perceive something, according to Husserl, we actually have an intention. The perception is an intention. We care about what we perceive. And this distinguishes it from a non-action. It is an action. And so that's the action of intending a perception. And I think that's basically what Tim was talking about. And it on that level, it makes a lot of sense. There was one other comment. I think Josh was talking about Wittgenstein and the fact that everything here and there relate to language and our conveniences or utensils, sort of. And yeah, but I think you can make a much more structured examination and see how these relate to our intention of observation when we make an observation, and how we identify things. Now, we don't use these terms extremely formally. And I think, sometimes we might say there when someone else will say here, and someone else will say you're not here, but then you argue, I'm here in Philadelphia. I absolutely am here. So you have a misunderstanding. We're in the same city or whatever. So this is kind of the set theory is useful, and I here and there under set theory, and I agree with Frank. They're not completely exclusive. It's just simply conventions of language that define when we're going to use one or the other, and we probably use them differently, perhaps, than the people who first used them in language. Maybe we have evolved our usage of here and there along the way. So that's all. It's just the structures of expression, the structures of perception really come into this. And of course, there was a big revolution in terms of relativity and even quantum science. So we need to. It's good that we're taking all those things into account as well. But relativity is essential. That absolutely is there when we talk about here. We talk about distinguishing here and there. It's always a relative determination. So that's that. There's a lot of truth being uttered today, and the discussion is very good that way. So I just wanted to add that historical note. This idea that there's a subjective effect on any perception that was mentioned by Tim. Absolutely true. I mean, it's absolutely true in the sense that Husserl came up with that concept, and that influenced, for example, the concept of Heidegger that temporality is the proof. The structures existing in temporality is the proof of all these metaphysical relationships. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I just want to mention one thing here about relativity. I think we need to be very, very careful about relativity. I think not everything's relative. They are not relative if there's no observer to note that they are relative. It's a very important point that I've been thinking about. If there's no observer, then if you run faster than somebody else, and you're just running faster, if a third person sees it, he'll say, oh, that's relative to that. And so I'm very careful now using relativity for everything. There's nobody to see it, it's not relative.
Relative is always, it's always relative to a point. There's always a point to which something is relative.
Okay. Yeah. No, fair enough. Yes, I agree with you. Thank you very much, James. Tim, you're back again. Yeah.
Okay, so when I came to the end of my discourse, speaking a little, calling it, speaking a little humorously and calling it a discourse. Soon after I discontinued, more came to me. Okay, so I will add is not the and direct it directly toward here and there. This is duality. So for one to perceive a here and there, must not the duality begin in that person's, must that duality not be in the person's mind? Conflict. So, right? So if a person that did not have conflict in his or her mind were to look out, what would that person see? Maybe that person would see no here or no there. It would just all be whatever word we could use. Okay, so that's what I want to propose. Here and there would be a reflection of the conflict. To perceive that would it not be a reflection of the conflict within us? Okay?
Okay, that's an interesting thought. Thank you. Thank you very much, Tim.
Okay.
Great.
You're welcome.
Great. Bruno.
Yes. I would like to discuss here and there in terms of physics. So in terms of physics, I would define here as the space where there are things that I can immediately touch or reach, and there as the space where there are things I cannot touch or reach materially. More precisely, I would define here as the space where there are things with which I can immediately interact materially, and there as the space where there are things with which I cannot immediately interact materially. I'm using the adverb materially to exclude the communication by exchange of information, like through a telephone. In fact, I could exchange information immediately with persons that are not here, but connected through the internet. Terry mentioned poke time, which is a similar concept. Having said that, here and there are relative terms. For example, I could say, Mary is here with me if she is in the same room. But at the same time, I could say, I'm here and Mary is there if she is in the same room, but at a distance of a few meters. Roland Mann said something similar. What I just said is not philosophical, but I don't see the utility of using the terms here and there in non-physical terms. So in my opinion, the terms here and there only apply to physical entities relative to my body. That's it.
That's very interesting, especially the last few words. You said relative to my body.
Right.
Well, that's the key as far as I'm concerned. Relative to my body, which is here.
And I didn't say my mind, I said my body.
Okay.
Intentionally.
Yeah, but your body without your mind is pretty, useless. When you say your body, you mean your mind. I think.
No, I mean
No?
my body. No, I mean my body, because mind is something we cannot really position.
It's the brain and body.
We cannot physically position it. That's why I said body, because body can be physically positioned in the space.
Yeah, mind is relative.
And the position can be measured, by the way.
But
Brain and body.
You need to have a brain. Yes. Who said
Yes.
that?
Brain and body.
You're right, Shireen. Yes, you're talking about your brain, where your mind.
Yes.
I mean, you wouldn't use your body if you didn't have a brain, right?
Exactly.
So yes, am I right, Bruno?
Of course, it's obvious.
Okay, that's fair enough. Okay, now it's interesting. Thank you very much, Bruno. Thank you.
Welcome.
Samuels, you waited a long time. Well done.
Thank you. So I'd like to say, so we've been saying how I am here. I'd like to know what exactly the I is in this context. Like, Bruno, you've been saying how the I is our body. Well, what I would say that the I is our consciousness, is our mind, but at the same time, with our body, our mind can say my body is here, but my body is here, and then you could say my mind is here, but what is saying? Who is the my? Who is saying the my? Is our mind saying my? Is our mind saying that our mind is here? Can our body say that our body itself is here? For me, I would say that only our mind is able to state that our mind is here. Our body is something that our mind experiences, just as our mind could experience anything else. So I'd like to know, when you're saying here, is the here our body, or is the here just our mind experiencing things? So I'd like to ask if here is our mind or body. So thank you.
Yeah, very good point, Samuel. Yes, it is. It is a good point. I agree. I happen to agree with you, and I'm not sure Bruno would, because I think it's the mind at work, and Bruno says it's the body at work, right? Which is a fair argument, and okay, that's very good. Thank you, Samuel. Very good thought. Very good thought. Thank you very much. Thank you for waiting as well. It must be late for you, no? Thanks a lot, Samuel. Michael.
Yeah, so several points. What Bruno suggested to define here relative to our bodies, from a epigenetic standpoint, it can make sense. This is probably how our brains come to this perception of here and there as relative to our body. But it does not necessarily make this notion better defined in any other sense. First, our body is not a physical dot without dimensions. That's already makes it problematic. So if we defined it based on what we feel when we touch, say, other objects, that also does not necessarily help, because when we are talking about feelings, this is already something that happens in our brains. And from physical standpoint, the better measure would be the notion of proximity between physical bodies, but that already introduces some continuity. So it's a spectrum. What is here, what is there, and what is in between. And also we we are sort of confined in how we are using these terms by our language. So if I ask you, are we here, all of you, in this meeting? Well, in some sense, we are as close to each other as if we were sitting in the same room, right? But it has nothing to do, or very little to do, with physical proximity. Because I know that some of you are even on different continents. So that's kind of murky. But interestingly, that just before this meeting, I was at another meeting, but also via Zoom, but local, with some local group. And the topic of this meeting had nothing to do with these philosophical issues. It was more about a political issue, about Trump election and what to do about this and what to expect and so on. But I invoked there in that discussion this notion that you probably are familiar with, this blind men who are trying to make sense of an elephant. And if we think about this more carefully, this is kind of related to this discussion. So first, if you take this metaphor literally, and if you accept this Bruno's definition as here as based on a physical touch, so all these blind men, they're here. They are touching the same animal, and from this animal standpoint, they're all here. From a standpoint of each of these blind men, they are not here. They are not touching directly each other. They are touching the same thing, and they don't even know that this is the same thing. So from the individual standpoint, they are not even in direct interactions with each other. But if we walk through this picture even further, it's a very fruitful metaphor, really. So we could think about any big issue or big thing in place of this elephant, that each of us individually cannot understand because of our sensorial limitations or our ideological or gnosiological limitations. It's too big, it's too complex. So replace an elephant with, say, any political issue, like immigration or war and peace or economy or whatever it is. It's so big and complex issue that no one of us individually cannot even hope to fully understand it. And that's the problem that generates a lot of this ideological polarization and divisions, and even worse, that people don't agree even on how they see this. And now one more implication of this, that if we accept that each of us has only very limited understanding of this reality, whatever this reality is, and by the way, this cannot be the whole like physical reality at the extreme, right? Or it can be any particular issue. So if we accept this position of intellectual humility, and this could be related to this James notion of directed perception. So we try to understand this, but we have to just accept that our understanding is limited and probably wrong. in many important respects, it's wrong. We can get something right, but we cannot even hope that we got right the whole thing. And if we accept this position, it allows us to talk to people who disagree with us. Because otherwise it would be just a shouting match. So, and no meaningful conversation would happen. But once you accept this position that probably I don't know the whole truth and I want to hear what you think about this, and I want to learn about your experience, about your perspective. And this makes possible 9 times out of 10 at least for people to talk to each other and hopefully to achieve the better understanding of this big thing that they are talking about each other. So it is this paradoxical relationship that as long as you lower your level of confidence in that you know the truth, you have a better chance to know the truth better through interactions with other people, through accommodating other perspectives in your worldview. And this really works. I participated in many discussions that use this model. And this is not just a theoretical proposition, it really works in practice. So that's just to summarize, maybe some way to make make it closer to us, but not necessarily individually, but collectively, as a community, as a society, whatever, to establish this kind of non-local interactions, if you want, between people, even if these people are very much not in agreement initially on this issue. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Michael. I have to say this. I have to. Your example of the elephant and the blind people, I don't agree with. I've never agreed with the thing that they are actually. It's a thing, and they don't know that it's not the same animal. Each blind person touched that thing, and as far as they were concerned, that was it. Only somebody outside, what I would like to call the observer, knew that they were touching only part of one thing. Each one was having the truth of what he was touching. That's my point. And
well, I don't disagree with this, but this is how we achieve our understanding of any reality and physical universe, by comparing our subjective perceptions of this.
Yeah, but
because no one could see the whole universe from outside, right? We are just assembling it gradually.
Yeah, but we could. If we watched, if we see that picture, we can see what's real, in inverted commas. They could never see what's real, and yet what they touched was real for them.
And by the way, even if I see this elephant in a picture, this does not mean that I fully understand.
I agree.
Who this elephant is.
I agree, because you can't see all sides of it. I agree with you.
Yeah.
I agree. Thank you very much. Thank you, Michael. Dominic.
Hey, yeah, admittedly a bit late, but I think I could catch up and chime in a bit, so I hope that's all right. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we're fine, yes, thank you.
Yeah, so I have a few thoughts, and I think my thread of thinking goes along the way of, I think, what Samuel was saying and Tim. So I tried to puzzle this together. So I think one way forward to kind of resolve the riddle here is to think about what is an identity. To give an example, maybe some will be familiar with the Borg from Star Trek, which is a weird species which is made of several individuals, but they all are networked together So each individual is actually kind of a cyborg that is connected constantly to a sort of a higher level network where all of them actually form one unit, like a beehive. Okay. And in such a scenario, for example, what does it mean to be an individual becomes very blurred, right? Some have perceived, I think, the whole Earth. I think there's this Gaia hypothesis, I think, if I'm not mistaken, that the whole planet, with all its components, with all its events, and with its geology, with all its activity in its entirety, is actually a being, a living thing in itself. And all we do as individuals, all this, let's say, organic material, this whole flow of organic material on the planet and inorganic material together, that is the whole metabolism of this being that is, in a sense, thinking or sort of acting in the world, and also has a certain output. So I guess what I'm just saying is, I think the concept of what is here and there is dependent on a more fundamental concept of identity, and what it means, who or what is the speaker or the identity that says here. And I think that's super important. And I think Samuel touched on that, and I think that's brilliant. So, and from that also comes the question, in what kind of concepts or first principles is that thinking entity, or that is, enunciating here and there, actually thinking? And then I think Tim pointed out about, we as humans, if we take that perspective and how we conceptualize about being me, the self, and how we conceptualize about the world, we have no other way than thinking in dualistically, yeah? Maybe that's not even a word, but I think you know what I mean. So I can only understand what a cup is if I have also some kind of concept of what it not is. I think everyone would agree that there's no way of how we can even think in some sort of absolutes. I think had one meeting, we were trying to conceptualize about the absolute nothing, Ron. I think you had a meeting around that. Yeah. And that is not humanly possible to comprehend. And I think that's where Tim's point comes in. And if that is the starting point, so when you have an individual that is saying here, and the way it is understanding its own self, and the way how it is, let's say, conceptualizing the first principles upon which it is conceptualizing on the world is dualistic in nature, then from that comes this whole idea of here and there. If you had a different identity, like the Borg, whose processing power, whose thinking process is dispersed about millions of other smaller processing units that all have to contribute to the, say, master identity, then you have a different identity in this model, and therefore a different concept of what it means to be here or there. Every individual in the Borg can say they are here, and they're right. Yeah, because they're all networked together. They are forming this hyper identity. So even if there's 1,000 of them who are physically in different places, they are speaking from the perspective of this mastermind. They are all here. Yeah. So I think that's a way to go. I have more to say, but I'll cue again that again thinking about who's saying that I'm here, what's their identity, and what first principles do they base their concept of the world upon in the first place? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dominic. Very, very interesting. Very interesting. Thank you. Terry.
I think I just had a quick comment. You brought up relativity, and I only want to make the simple point that even to do the example of saying running faster, you cannot run faster unless you have something else that you're running against. It's always a pair.
Oh, yeah.
Classic Newtonian pair. So it just changes the dynamic a little bit to realize that abstract states of saying I'm moving at some velocity, you can't create those. You can't state those without going back to some history where it gets a little more complicated and you have to start talking about here and there. Your definition is when you accelerate, something else becomes farther there, and you say your own definition of here. So I think relativity is it's important to keep the history in mind when we talk about issues of relativity. In fact, that's one of the fundamental premises I'm working on these days, is that you must track the history. When you accelerate, that's something that happens. It's in your memory. It was not an abstraction. It was a real thing that actually occurred to you, that you have that as part of what you're saying.
No, maybe I didn't say it clearly. What I said, what I thought I said was, if one person's running faster than another one, then one is just running faster, which is the relation between them. But I don't call it relative, because they're not relative unless somebody else, an observer, says they're relative to each other. That was my point.
Yeah, and what I was saying is that if you go back into the full history of it, it never works out exactly that way. It always is relative, because at some point you had to accelerate relative to the Earth. The other person had to accelerate relative to the Earth. That becomes an absolute difference between the two. You have a different velocity relative to the Earth and that, but you both started at the Earth. And this is a point, it's an important point. It actually changes the physics of the situation. And this is something where these are some papers I've done and some work I'm doing, that if you don't take that into account, you literally cannot get an accurate description of the clocks on the systems that have accelerated. They actually fall apart in a very profound way. Your definition of actual causal elapsed time becomes in disagreement with your definition of time as defined by the physics of that system. That's a profound disagreement. To say that your physics time does not agree with your elapsed time, and that it's a gradient across the length of the object, is not a standard assertion in physics. And yet it's true. This is the weirdest thing about this. The math is too simple. I've had physicists agree with me, but immediately you don't want to go that route, because if you go that route, it destroys the Poincare symmetries, and you wind up with a fractal universe. So there's just an intriguing in it. We have to remember the histories, and not just because we don't want to be forgetful, but because they change us. They change our definition of time. And if you're messing with your definition of time, you can't ignore that. And every time you accelerate, you mess with your definition of time in a profound way that is not obvious how that gets resolved. So a little bit tangential to this, but it is related to here versus there, because you can't get there unless you have some definition. You know, you can just say, well, there it is, and I just accept it. But most of it accept that somehow the universe at least has some kind of a common start, and things move. Some things move, some things don't move, and it turns out that's important. So it comes into our definitions of how you even create a there, let alone how you process it.
Okay, thank you very much. Very interesting. Very good explanation. Thank you. Roland.
Hi. Back again. Wow, there's so much cool stuff in this discussion. I think Tim and Samuel have really opened up an interesting sort of can of worms here. I thought Samuel's question is extremely pertinent and goes to the nature of identity. And of course, Tim also posits a very interesting question, which connects the idea of objectification with some sort of inner conflict, which I think that makes sense to me. So I suppose if one imagined a system, I suppose if it starts with the idea of a living system that is basically self-organizing is going to be responding to influences over time in one way or another, and presumably using some influences to sustain it and rejecting other influences as antagonistic. So in each case, it will have to formulate some response to that influence. And when it strikes me that this process that we have of objectification is exactly that. And I I suggest that when we formulate an object, we at the same time formulate an identity. In other words, the self-image that we create from time to time is directly related to the types of experiences that we're having, the objects that we're formulating, and so forth. In other words, Tim used the idea, I think, earlier on. I can't remember whether he used these words, but he suggested that the world is like a mirror, I think, or something like that. That objects are projections, and it's hard to dispute that because as the world that we perceive is within our awareness, and our awareness apparently is constructed within ourselves. What room is there for disagreeing with that? I can't really see any. But in discussing objects and where they are and so forth, we often, I think, forget to consider perhaps the object that we regard as most important in that world, which is generally our own selves. So to summarize that, I would say that when we start to when we formulate when we perceive objects around us, we are at the same time perceiving ourselves in relation to it. We're constructing a self-image, and that self-image is continuously changing. There was quite a good little example of that some years ago, about 4 or 5 years ago, I think it was. I can remember seeing this and connecting these ideas together at the time. And it was a Greek man who had missed an airline flight. You probably have seen this piece of news at some point. The Greek man, he wanted to catch this airline flight. It was very important, but he literally was seconds too late for boarding the aircraft. And the gates closed, and he was sat there thinking, oh, God, this is terrible, and so forth. So at that time, he had obviously a certain type of self-image that arose from the event. But then a few minutes later, he found that the aircraft had crashed. And so it was the luckiest day of his life. So suddenly his self-image switches completely from like a guy who's like in a really bad way to a very, very fortunate chap. And this didn't happen because anything, changed specifically for him. He didn't like get some sort of revelation. Basically, it was the outside events changed, and therefore he saw himself differently in relation to those things. And I think this is happening all the time if one looks carefully. So that's the first thing I would say. Dominic refers to the idea of identity as well, and the idea of multiple identities. But what's quite interesting about Dominic's comments was that it was almost like a third party describing them. Ron's mentioned this idea a few times, that it's very easy to look at a scenario, but then you're looking at it from the outside, from an observer's point of view, without really acknowledging you're doing that. So, of course, when we are looking at the world, we're not looking at it from an outside point of view. We're looking at it from our point of view, and we can't get outside that. So the identity that we formulate from moment to moment is the one that we happen to perceive at the time. It's not fixed or observable from the outside. I think, and the last point I wanted to make was about Tim's observation about conflict, which I thought was very interesting. And there is something that occurred to me some years ago, which it sounds a bit crazy, but I started to think of the idea that when we perceive objects, it's like an error message. That in some way, the construction of an object is like the presentation of some sort of conflict within us, some sort of differential that we then need to resolve. And I suppose one way of thinking of that is to say, well, supposing I didn't need to do anything. Supposing I was a system that was happy to accept anything that happened to me. Would I need to have a self-image? Would I need to have any objects? I think the answer to that is probably no. And I think probably this idea of why we create objects one thought I've had around this is possibly some value can be found in devices that human beings create, like, for example, the latest technologies in self-driving cars and things like that. What's going on in the systems that are controlling those things? Presumably, it's necessary for those systems to create a self-image as well as an image of the objects around them in order to establish the relationship between them. Are we any different, I wonder? So, anyway, that's my 4 cents. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Ronan. Very interesting indeed. Well done. James.
Thanks. The discussion is so much fun. I'm kind of I just wanted to mention this time about a kind of like a metaphor for the quantum notion of intentionality. I think that was mentioned by Terry first. The idea that you feel like you're touching something if you observe it, right? Which was kind of like it's not. I don't think it's a good enough metaphor at that point. I think it's more when we observe something or we have an intention of observing it, and the intention is witnessed by the fact that we have to open our eye to receive a photon or a series of photons from a light source. For example, when we're making that observation or having a perception. So this is a intentional wish. The Heidegger had a habit of referring to it as an Augenblick, the idea that it's just a moment in temporality. So the space time, in space time, there's a temporal event called the wink of an eye, and that temporal event is the intentional opening of the eye so that we can capture a photon or photons on the retina, and at that point they become ours. They're no longer the star's photon or the light's photon. They're ours. They're impacted on our retina, and some kind of a vector is transmitted to the occipital lobe, and we have this experience and of some kind of being, maybe just a star, maybe something in our environment. So this becomes the reality of it, and it's the same thing as if we opened up a paper bag, and a black paper bag, and we just simply expose the black paper bag. Or maybe it's a sensitive black paper bag with photographic film on the back of it, and we open the camera and we receive the image. Same thing. It was an intentional act, and that's the whole point about perception. Is it's not magic. It's always intentional. It's always directed by us. It's always purposed through our rationality, our active existence, and the yeah. So that's all. I just think that's a very useful metaphor to help understand that principle of I forget what the name of it is, but the fact that something can be influenced by observation, and the any determination about a physical object is physically influenced by the observation of it in quantum mechanics, and then and how it is real. And then I had a question, which is for the people I've been talking about identity. Is it really being used by you as a synonym for subjectivity? In other words, are you using identity as a synonym of subjectivity, or am I understanding it wrong? Is there something different in when you use identity in the expression? Thank you.
Thank you very much, James. Thank you. Where are we? Michael.
Dominic opened a very fruitful way to think about this by linking this to identity. And someone asked a question, what does it feel to be a bat, or what does
Yes.
it mean to be a bat? But we can ask the same question, what does it mean to be a human? Because for us it appears like I have my self-image, my experience as like a whole, as one thing, undivided experience. But first, we know that this is not always true, because there is this multiple personality disorder when this experience for the same person can be really divided. But also we know that this experience is constructed by interactions between myriads of neurons. And the question is, what does it make this interaction to generate this one consistent self-image? And this is what Chalmers defines as the hard problem of consciousness. And my impression that we still don't have the answer to this. But I can ask a different question. If we consider each element of the system, and the system is our brain, say an element like neuron, can we say that neuron has its own experience? Whatever would it imply? So the problem is with discussion of experiences that we cannot perceive them directly. I only can perceive my own experience directly. But I don't know what does it mean to be a neuron in my brain. But obviously, somehow these interactions between them generate my identity that I can perceive directly. But why can I perceive it directly? Because this is my identity, because I am me, my brain, and not individual neurons. And this makes me thinking that maybe the critical part of this definition of identity is the integrity of a system. And under integrity, I mean that if a system can be described by a state that can characterize the whole system, then we can think about the system as having identity and capable to have its own experience, although it is impossible to communicate its experience to us because we are not the system. And the system does not maybe even need to be alive. Maybe it can apply to even physical systems, quantum systems. This is speculative, of course. But here is another speculative question. When Dominic brought up this idea of Borgs, of a Borg, so I would say that probably we all are parts of a Borg, or rather of multiple Borgs, because we are elements or subsystems of some other things that have their own identity, like a family or organization, or other organizations, or political tribes, or a country, and so on. But I cannot say what does it mean to be, say, my organization, whatever it is, because I am not that, right? That's something bigger than I. But nevertheless, these organizations act as they have their own identity. And there is even this notion of this tribal identity. When a person identifies so strongly with a particular tribe, that it becomes like a part of their own identity. Although this tribe itself, whether it's a team or political party or whatever it is, you cannot perceive directly what it is, but it's there. And so I think that maybe we have to acknowledge that we all are kind of Borgs of different levels. And although I cannot say what does it mean to be, say, a team, say, a sports team or business team, development team, but we still say that our team's position is such and such and such. So we are saying on behalf of a team, as this team would be a real thing. And maybe in some sense it is a real thing. Especially if this is organized in some sort of hierarchical way, like our brains are. So that's something to consider.
Thank you very much, Michael. One thing really struck me when you said, "What's it like to be a human?" And that's brilliant. I think we should have a whole Zoom on that.
Yeah.
It's absolutely brilliant. I'm going to think about that. Yes, yes. I wonder what it's like, really. Bruno, you're all glutton for punishment today. Bruno.
Yes. The terms here and there are used in either physical or metaphorical sense. Now, any meaning of here and there which is not physical is metaphorical. But anyway, the metaphorical meaning relates to the physical one. So when we discuss here and there, we should first consider the physical meaning. That's it.
Okay. So I can continue disagreeing with you then. That was that short.
No problem.
Thank you very much, Bruno. Thank you. Terry.
Yes.
How did you pop in there?
I don't know. I just raised my hand.
Oh, well, okay. I have to go. Oh, okay, fair enough. Roland, you've got to have a word with Terry.
What
But
happened?
I thought, weren't you there before?
No, I was ahead of Roland all the time.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I think he
Oh,
was.
sorry,
yeah,
sorry.
yeah.
I'm getting sorry.
Roland's been,
No, sorry, Terry. You're right. You're right. Sorry. Carry on, please, Terry.
A couple comments. When Michael talked about neuron experiences, obviously nobody knows what a neuron experience is, but we do have actual detailed data on what neurons intend. And that's interesting because if you look at what neurons intend in the brain when someone's trying to move their arm, they don't agree with each other. You can actually map out that they have different definitions. One will think, I want to move my arm this way. And the other one says, no, I want to move it this way. And the actual motion that comes out as a result of this is a consensus derived in some fashion we don't quite understand, but it appears to be a phase sum of all these different intentions. So again, you can't say anything about the experience, but they can certainly have intent. And the intent is part of how we go about figuring out what's the right way to do something. You can feel this in your own mind if you look carefully. When you look at some problem and you look at something on your desk and say, how should I grab that? And there's some awkward positioning to it. That is actually your neurons competing with each other. They're defining some of them are looking this way and the other. So you can actually feel them doing this, which is also interesting because even if the individual neurons don't have the intent, your collective groupings show up in your mind as an intent of your own confusion about which way do I do this. And at that point, they become a real part of an intention of your attention, of your perception. So some intriguing philosophical issues just from the actual data about how this is done. And again, the data collection techniques have gotten so extraordinary in the last decade. It's just amazing. Things like two-photon reception, they can just find out things that they never could have known before. So average out your number of neurons by the perception you feel in your brain, and I guess you can argue that there's a little bit of perception in that collective set of neurons. Here I'm talking about neurons. I'm not talking about some of the panpsyche thing. I'm just talking about neurons. Obviously, you're doing something. So there's a case where the participation of a group of neurons is perceptible to your own mind, and it's very easy to do it. Just set yourself up with an awkward situation, try to figure it out, and you can watch the population of neurons give you different ideas, different images of what it is that you should try to do. The other comment I was going to make, let's see. Oh, James, you talked about photon collapse. That is the term, the observation, the collapse. People don't like that term collapse. They try to get away from it. They hate it. But it still probably is the most accurate description for what happens, because there's a, I forget which, I'm never good with names. There's a famous early astronomer who just pondered on that, said, how does a single photon get from a distant star in a wavefront that covers half the universe, and then it winds up only in my eye? But how does that work? And what they do nowadays, they dress it up with math, and they talk about this is and that's is, and it doesn't change the problem. It's still the same problem. The photon doesn't know where it's going by all intents that we can tell, and yet it somehow winds up right here. So every time we observe, we do not change just ourselves. We change literally the entire structure, in some cases, of enormous volumes of space by a very, very tiny bit. Very, very tiny bit, but it's still a change. And people debate whether that's a real change. And one of the things I always point out is, if you can reflect a photon from a mirror, it's real. And it's still not a collapsed particle yet, because that photon gets a little bit of momentum when it does that. So these things are not as arbitrary as they seem. There's a reality to these gigantic waves, and we don't understand what that means. The photon could have reflected off of a giant mirror up until the point it hit your retina, and it could have gone right back to where it was a billion years later. But once it hits your retina, and for some reason decides that it likes your little receptors or rhodopsins in your eye, that's it. All those effects disappear, but in a way that's not quite balanced in time. That is, it's as if the photon suddenly decided, no, I never meant to go anywhere else. I only meant to go in your eye, nowhere else. Just like a particle, right straight there. We play a bigger role in reality than I think we think sometimes. And you bring that up, of course, it's a classic philosophical conundrum that people bring up. But I think most of the mathematics are just obfuscation. People don't want to face the fact that we still don't get this. That something's not quite right with our understanding of space and time. So that's all I had to say.
Oh, fascinating. Thank you, Terry. Very, very interesting. Thank you. Dominic.
Yeah, some very interesting points here. So maybe I start, I think, James, maybe it was you raising the question, between using the term identity and using the term subjective or subjectivity and so on. So my take on it, I just can offer my take on it, is that a little bit, I think what Michael said, you said earlier, is that to me, identity is sort of, has everything to do with it's maybe ascribing a set of properties of a thing and to one label. So if I have a cup, I call it the cup, but truly there's this thing in the world that I think has a boundary. We talked, I think, about why we think in terms of objects as well. And then we kind of stop talking about each individual property of that thing within that boundary, but we start just calling it a cup. And then, to me, that's where I take sort of this collection of properties and ascribe it a label, and then I treat this collection of properties in such a way in the world that I don't refer to its components individually, but it fulfills a certain function, and I kind of provided it with an identity. And in that case, me as a human, I gave it that identity. Whereas to me, subjectivity is the whole matter where, it's a very good question, but is where a certain identity has a way to relate to the world and process information, and one thing does it in a different way than the other. But I like the question a lot. It made me think a lot, and I guess in our conversation it's important to kind of figure out, how we use these terms. But that I try to be brief, but it brings me to another thing I've been reading recently. I think some of you are also familiar with Stephen Wolfram. Some view him very critically, but I kind of like that guy. But so he wrote an article about the alien mind and neural networks, and I think that was very interesting because, in a nutshell, as far as I understand his idea, that we can now, through the magic of neural networks and AI and so on, actually make alien minds and then see how they think and kind of how they process information. So if you have a model of the human brain that is, let's say in the simplest terms, some kind of neural network, very complex and so on, that how about, and deliver certain outputs based on certain inputs, how about then we modify this neural network and make it more akin to a cat or a fly, right? And then we feed it in with certain inputs and it delivers certain outputs. Then you have a non-human mind that you can look at and how it behaves and what output it produces. And in a sense, you can kind of maybe in some sense look into its way of processing information, which inputs provide with output and what's happening there in between, what activity is there. And to me, I find this very interesting to bring that up because maybe it would be a way to say, well, if you have this kind of thinking being, this kind of, let's say a network that is processing information in the world, how does it relate to the world? What outputs does it deliver? And then you can compare each mind's subjectivity in a way. So, for the same input, what they deliver different outputs. So I found this idea very interesting that if you bring in neural networks, then, and you say that the complex neural network is some kind of mind that has a thinking process. And nowadays you can make another neural network that is maybe akin to a fly and look, what is this, will this deliver? And how it will conceptualize about itself. So I don't know, I just throw that into the conversation. Oh, I will really close by saying, Michael, very good idea that we're all little Borgs and we form collectives. And I think there was a philosopher asking a provocative question, a modern one. He said, I think, is Microsoft really there? Microsoft where is it, or is it actually here? Is it like everywhere, or is Microsoft here? It's just this idea of Microsoft, but where is it? Yeah, I like that.
Point.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah. Not for me. I'm not using it.
You don't know. Also, I have a Mac here, so Apple Mac.
Thank you, Dominic. Thank you very much, James.
Thank you. Yeah, we might be all sending our minds to Microsoft someday. You never know. This is, or maybe we already have. Who knows? And we don't know it. Yeah, I really like the fact that you gave a great answer to my question, Dominic. Yeah. So yeah. I'd love to sort of get in touch, in terms of on email, to discuss things. But this on this this question of the hard problem, that Michael brought up. I just have a couple questions. I was just wondering, why do some people see a barrier between experience and consciousness? The hard problem seems to posit a barrier for me between experience and consciousness. The paper itself is just kind of ambiguous, but that seems to be the crux of what that problem establishes. The other thing is, why do some people, the people that talk about the hard problem, why why would experience not be transparent to consciousness, and at the same time, simultaneously, a role of consciousness? So, why does the hard problem try to seem to exclude consciousness from experience in both directions, which is, to me, a really artificial type of operation. So that's why I don't understand why people adopt it. I know my position is a little close to Daniel Dennett's position. It's difficult to understand why it became so popular. So it's a question maybe for Michael to answer. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, James. John. John, are you there?
Yes.
Okay.
So this point I'm going to make also relates to the idea of consciousness in a sense. So just a thought experiment. If I were to split myself into two different people, or two of the same people, who is now here? Like, do I inhabit which of these two people has the here that I previously had? So, I guess the question I have is, do I go from being one here to two heres, or are now there two different heres? That makes me think that it's probably the case that there's going to be now two heres. So then I kind of think of the whole universe as a bunch of different heres. Like the universe consists of heres everywhere. But then to identify as that here, you need the consciousness. That's it.
Would you not be two different heres? Because the second you split, you'll both have different feelings and thoughts and memories, and you'll be different immediately.
So, from myself, if I were to split myself, that's the question. I think one of them would have to continue my current self, and the other one would have to be a new self. That's just the way that's just my intuitive thought. And somebody previously had mentioned these cyborgs in Star Trek or whatever, who they link their consciousness, but it just doesn't seem like a very possible thing, because I feel it's the physical boundaries of being a self is what determines is the physical boundaries of the person determines what your self is.
Okay, thank you very much, John. Interesting. Roland.
Yeah, I thought I'd come back on James's question of what I would use identity to mean. And in fact, Michael sort of preempted that by using a fantastic expression, the integrity of a system. I think that really is what it comes down to for me, the integrity of a system that is moving through time and is experiencing different influences. And that integrity is being challenged at different, all the time really. And it's developing responses to those challenges. And as I see it, it seems to me that in preserving the integrity of that system, each challenge that comes its way will trigger various different types of behaviors in it that will then be part of its identity at that moment. So the identity is shifting continuously depending upon what influences it's under. And of course, what is objectifying is shifting as well. But that also tied into something that John just said, which is this idea of, well, what is the integrity of a system? What is that? I don't think it is the scope of a physical body at all. That doesn't make any sense to me because there are lots of people who sacrifice themselves for apparently larger things. So the people who sacrifice themselves for political aims, for their country, for their family, where they will be happy to accept suffering, damage, disintegration of their own physicality because they believe it will have some beneficial effect elsewhere. How would you do that if your focus was simply on the maintaining the integrity of your own self? I don't think you could do. So as I see it, the idea of the self is a very, very fluid thing, and it changes from moment to moment. So what we are trying to preserve in way of integrity will shift depending upon depending upon our natures, really. There are a lot of people who, for example, are focusing on ecological systems. So they will identify not merely with human systems, but also other systems, animal systems, vegetable systems, ecosystems, and attempt to protect those systems and go out of their way to do so, despite the fact that there may be a penalty in terms of their own physicality and their own experience. So I think it's a very interesting question, but I think it revolves around the integrity of a system. But what that system happens to be from moment to moment will depend very much upon what that person is trying to do and where they're trying to go. So that's what I would say about that. Thanks.
Thank you, Ron. Thank you. Interesting. Terry.
Well, I have to get live Terry instead of static Terry. So that's my quantum doppelganger. I had to point out that I did a review on Wolfram 22 years ago. Has it really been that long on his book, A New Kind of Science? And was responding to that. Wolfram's a very smart fellow. He made the mathematical side. It's a brilliant mathematical side. That's where he made enough money to sit off for a year and write the New Kind of Science book. The New Kind of Science book was a faith premise. He said that I'm absolutely sure that reality is a lattice of interacting CPUs. You can tell a little bit of computer science background coming in here. So and that actually fits with some models for how they do QCD, quantum chromodynamics and such. They use a lattice model. But that was his premise, and he went with it. And he was hoping he would find something amazing that would just suddenly explain the entire universe. He didn't in the book. In fact, he only had one picture in that whole stupid book, and it's 1,000 pages that kind of sort of looked a little bit, tiny, maybe bit like actual physics, and everything else was just fluff and pretty pictures. So it was one of the most content-free books I've ever read in my life. I was able to return it, so I didn't have to pay the full value. So I still did a review on it. So if I sound like I'm a little bitter, I'm sorry. I was just so unimpressed with that book, which he also took the main lattice content. I met the guy who actually wrote most of that set of ideas and had his own book. And Wolfram was so powerful at that time, he just kind of took the guy's book. I could find his name, Dig. I've still got a copy of his book, but it was just sad. I mean, I talked for hours back and he was going over that, and you could tell that he was trying very hard not to attack Wolfram because it was dangerous, deadly to attack Wolfram at that time. But his work had been taken, and he got nothing for it. I mean, no, he didn't get the credit for it he deserved. So that's another reason I wasn't real keen on that. I didn't find that out until later, well after the article was out. Wolfram, I haven't listened to his stuff lately. He's still in a digitized lattice writing for physics reasons. I don't follow that. Nothing to do with that. He probably has entertaining presentations. I don't know. He seems to have mellowed over the years because back at that time, he was brutal to people. He was just brutal. He did not give anybody else except himself credit. You know, he'd give him a passing mark, and just, it was awful.
He's
So I
been
hope that
he's
whoever he is
been
now. Sorry, you got over here.
he's been quite quiet for a while, quieter than he
Yeah,
used to be.
I think he got quiet for a while because this whole thing, it didn't work. It first of all, it just didn't work. None of it worked. So I think he went back and mellowed. So I assume what he's doing now is superior stuff. I hope, but I haven't had any. I just hadn't had any interest in it because to me, digitization is the ultimate classical reality, and I think what's going on beneath that is something quite a bit different from that. So, oh, but the specific point was, if Wolfram is now claiming that they have neural models that can tell the difference between humans and flies, that's crap. Our neural models are so poor that artificial neural networks, I know they get a lot of press and everybody claims that they're good. They don't even capture some of the basic features of neurons, even after all these decades. They don't do phase relationships, for instance. There's a few people working on complex phase relationships, neurons, which I really encourage one guy at a research meeting to all right, you're doing it. Keep doing it because he's getting some fantastic results by using phase models. We don't understand neurons very well right now. So the fact that Wolfram is claiming that, I know it's not true because I've seen the actual research on that stuff. We're not that advanced in how we understand neurons. There's just so much. I'm tired of the crap. You know, it's like living in an LLM. Everybody just puts this crap together and spins it around and comes out with a new basic physics theory or a new that. It's just like the LLMs. They just keep restirring this crap without ever bothering to figure out what's actually going on. Nobody does that anymore. They just restir the stuff and come up with some new recipe. So I'm sorry, I get a little tired of it sometimes. And that's an example. You just casually throw out some stuff, say, oh yeah, we know. No, we don't. Go back to the literature. Go back to the actual results. Don't do that. Figure out how much we actually know about neurons instead of making a YouTube video claiming we know everything. No, you don't know everything. Go back and check the people who are actually working it, people who are in labs using equipment. Talk to them sometimes instead of doing all these presentations on this stuff. Did I get onto a soapbox? I believe I
You did.
I will leave it there.
It's okay. You're forgiven.
My apologies, but the other.
You're fine. Thank you. Thank you.
I wish we did. That would be fantastic if we did. We can't even figure out how to do memory. People, if you ask the textbook, it'll say it's connectionism. That's what it is. I've talked to people who have done too much research on exactly that point. I remember one of them, I was asking him, well, what was it really? He says, we don't know. And this was the guy working in that field. This was his dedicated, that was his life. We need a little more humility in some of this stuff. There's clearly some stuff going on we don't get. So, am I done with my rant yet? I think I'm done with.
Thank you, Terry.
Bye-bye.
It was very exciting. Thank you. Michael.
Yeah, I probably agree with Terry regarding Wolfram. So his new kind of science, it was refreshing and stimulating, but then probably it was downhill from that. Although I don't know all these personal issues about Wolfram. So anyway, but it's such a good discussion, and on James' question about experience and consciousness, I don't really see them as like in contradiction, but I wrote a whole essay on this very topic, but I just don't know what to do with it. And but maybe if I could share it with you, it could be another stimulating discussion about this. But briefly, to me, the big problem is not to explain consciousness, but to explain experience. Where does experience come from? Because in physics, we, it seems, don't have a place for it. How could it suddenly emerge from nowhere? And that was the main issue that I tried to address. But this is related to this Dominic's notion of integrity, how he understands it, that when we have a thing that to which we can assign some kind of a label that describes this whole thing. And then we can think about the thing as like holistic system. But what is this label? So my notion is that this label is what we call a state in physics. So this is what you usually have between inputs and outputs, the internal state of the system. And if the system is really a system, as we usually understand it, so it's not just collection of unrelated things, but something that is in interaction, in close interaction, then under certain conditions, and these conditions were discussed already, you can have the process of self-organization that brings about this state of the system as a whole. So all these individual states of individual elements generate collectively the state of the system as a whole. And it is this, so the label, it can be in our brains. But what is behind these labels is this could be the actual states of actual systems, assuming that the actual world exists not only in our imagination, but in reality. And so this is, I think that Roland comes really close to my understanding of this, that this integrity, it's based on this process of forming these collective states of the system. And once you have this collective state, you have a system, and in my view, the system has an experience, subjective experience of changes in this state. Although there is no way to share this experience with us if we are not the system. And this kind of closes this loop between objective physical processes and subjective experiences of these processes through these collective states of the system. And in my view, all states are collective. So even if you go down all the way to quantum mechanical systems, so the equations of quantum mechanics describe the whole system. It's not just one electron, it's the whole quantum field. And it has a collective state, always. So that's all very interesting, but probably now I have to go. But it's so thank you for this great discussion.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you. Thank you very much. The last one tonight is Dominic.
Oh, I wasn't ready for this much responsibility and power. So I just turned my camera off and escape.
No, you can't. That's it.
It's too late now.
Too late. Too late.
Well, Ron, you always come up with really amazing starting points. It's like, okay, what is now? That's it, or whatever, or like, here, there, let's talk about it. And it's just amazing how much comes out of it and when we really drill into it. So I think that's fantastic. Yeah, great. I think now maybe a few quick points then, I don't know, and then we're closing. So I know, Michael, maybe what you're alluding to is, and again, I'm just a hobbyist, okay, but I've been reading about chaos theory a bit, and then in mathematics, you have this idea of the great attractor, and you have a quadratic system, and the great attractor is this in a system where you have different initial conditions, but when the system evolves, then it will converge toward always to converge towards a certain state. Yeah.
That's exactly this. Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. And I find it very interesting because I'm across it recently, actually, that this is maybe identity. This is where the system has its identity. There where everything, so no matter where you start, the system will evolve and always end up in this, so has a ground state towards which it will always kind of evolve, most likely with highest probability, and then that's where its identity is. But if you disturb the system, you add a lot to the system or water, or disturb it very strongly, then maybe it will end up somewhere else. Yeah, and then change its identity in a sense. But this also brings us, I think, someone else mentioned boundaries, and I think this could be another key concept from which to kind of develop the conversation. Is when you have here and there must be a boundary somewhere. Yeah. And then you have a bit of a boundary problem. Okay, when there's a here and then there's a there, we need to talk about these boundaries and how they are defined, because the here must be on one side of the boundary and the there somehow on the other side, right? So where does this boundary actually come from, and who or what is drawing this boundary? Yeah. So maybe that's another way to talk about it. And I will close by saying that I think there was some scientists, I'm trying to paraphrase this, but it was saying first, in physics and in this, the hard sciences, everything was atoms. Then it was all waves. Then it was all fields. And I think now the newest is, I think it's all networks. It's all just networks. So, and in each case, I think what really is happening is we choose another protagonist in the stories that we tell ourselves in our attempt to describe the world. But they're still all just stories. Okay, thank you.
You sound like Yuval Harari. Stories.
And Dominique, every one of those ones you just mentioned consists of classical concepts and a presumption that space and time pre-exist, including the networks. And this is where we have to dig deeper and stop assuming that space and time are fundamental.
Agreed. Yeah.
Well, folks, that was short and sweet and simple. And thank you very much. I should have mentioned at the beginning, I forgot that will not be a session next month, not because I'm too tired after today, but because I'm traveling a bit. So next month is March, right? Yeah. So April we'll meet again. Thank you very, very much, everybody. It was delightful. And I look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you very much, everybody. Fantastic.